Unrelating podcasts are meant to be for education and entertainment. They don't constitute a service or advice. For personal struggles, please reach out to a medical or mental health professional.
Testing 1 2 1 2 1 2. How do I sound?
You sound good. How do I sound?
Good.
We might be getting the hang of this. Anyway, I'm excited to have this couple on, and we don't know much about them, so we'll get to know them and see how things are going for them and if we can be a support.
When I used to go to therapy years ago, I went in for one reason, which was it was couples counseling, but it quickly became something completely different, and it became more like an individual counseling. So when I went in for one thing, I started with one thing with one agenda. That kind of pivoted, and it became another sort of focus, and that really sort of helped me quite a bit personally. It didn't help my relationship at all. But
our agenda today is to get to know the guests and to see if there's anything about their relationship that we can shed light on or help them make adjustments to, just in a positive way.
Sometimes it's good to just go talk to somebody and just get sort of your head cleared out, get some stuff off your chest.
And out of your head. I actually think that's more important is, the clutter. The brain clutter is what gets most of us. Like you were saying, like you think it's one thing, but it's something different. It's because, you've been accumulating all these thoughts and feelings about your relationship. And then it's like time to declutter or to prune, as us brain nerds call it.
Do you see that a lot with your practice?
Yes. And I think you see it a lot in society. We're talking about like conspiracy theories, things like that. Like people like theories. They like to have an explanation for things. And the more provocative, the better in this sensationalized kind of world we live in. So, our brain makes theories about why things are happening in our relationships and in our lives. And we stick to them and we're like, yeah, I think it's because of this. And you went to couples counseling. But then as you started to kind of unpack, declutter, prune, whatever you want to call it, you realize, oh, it might be something different, or it might be an issue over here instead of over here. And the only way to get to those core things is to take away the baggage and the noise and the things you thought you knew about how you were feeling.
That makes total sense.
And I had a client yesterday. We were talking about so much of therapy and people coming to my practice is like, wow, I didn't even know I needed that. And that was a realization that person came to is like, this whole time, I didn't realize that was a need I was carrying around with me. I was like, yeah, and look at kind of the pattern of behavior that resulted of you kind of trying to fill that need in a different way.
I think we just get lost in the weeds day to day. It's like you're so in it. You tend not to see the forest through the trees. Is that the right saying? It's
absolutely
really, really, yeah, it's you get stuck in this tunnel vision day to day, and you don't think about, am I happy? Is this what I want? Is this what I need? Am I doing this the right way? Am I living my life, the way I should be or could be? But that said, yeah, you do get a little lost in the weeds sometimes. And
yeah.
I said that the other day at work. I was lost in the weeds, and I needed to take a step back and look big picture at the forest and say, okay, this is what's going on. I'm down here. I need to be way up here.
Yeah, and why having a neutral third party is so beneficial to that is because I'm not in it emotionally the way someone is in their own life. So I'm already a step back when I'm hearing the information, which makes a big difference.
Welcome to Unrelating with Kel and Michelle, and I'm one of your hosts, Kelly. With me is my co-host, Michelle, a licensed marriage and family therapist who's been providing individual and couples therapy for over a decade. Together, we'll explore how we engage in relationships, why we do what we do, and what causes people to unrelate. Welcome to Unrelating with Kel and Michelle. We are with Ed and Joey. Hi, guys. How you doing?
Hey. We're good. How are you guys?
We are excited to have you on.
I guess we need to start off by just, talk about the two of you, how you met, a little bit of backstory.
Do you want to start or me?
I start. It's the same story.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Well, we've been together for 8 years. I think most gay couples usually meet online these days just because it's so much easier to find people. So we met 8 years ago when I was actually starting grad school. And I don't think either of us were really looking for anything serious because I was broke because of grad school, and I was working and going to grad school full time, and Joey was going through his stuff.
Yeah, I graduated and sort of started looking for my job post undergrad. So, I mean, 8 years ago, that was like the the last recession.
Yeah.
Right. You think of what has changed in the world in 8 years, but
Yeah, I was about to say
Yeah.
like even saying that we were meeting online 8 years ago was a little bit more taboo than it would be
Now,
today.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a
I
lot
mean,
more
not for straight people, it's totally taboo, but I think for gay people have been meeting online since like early 2000s. That's because really that's the only place they could find people after a while.
Yeah,
Which website?
We met on
it was on
Jack.
a couple. I think it was Jack. Yeah,
Yeah, Jack was the one of the first ones, but Joey wasn't like super out back then. So,
I wasn't ready
Yeah,
for anything. I was figuring a lot of stuff out at the time.
yeah.
So I kind of shunned Ed for the first couple of years.
Actually, we met like 10 years ago because we met very casually in the beginning. Like we were just like, oh, okay, this is just for fun. We're not really doing anything serious. And then Joey's parents were getting divorced.
Yeah, so I was going through a little bit of a rough patch.
And then we didn't talk for a year because he was
Routine.
like, I don't want to deal with anything right now.
Yeah.
And then I started dating someone else. And then I started grad school. And then Joey tried hanging out with me again.
Yeah, we reconnected because I was sort of coming into my own or discovering my own sexuality, and I wanted to reconnect.
Yeah.
And we reconnected as friends, I think. He actually tried setting me up. This is going to be broadcast.
We're not using names.
Yeah, right. He tried to set me up with one of his friends, a
I
couple
did.
of his friends.
I did.
what could possibly go wrong?
Exactly. And they actually posed the question, hey, why, like, you're really good friends with it. Why haven't you ever, dated? And I said, that was a really good point. Why don't I try? And
then
I don't know. Ed was in a lot more of a stable place. He was a lot more ready to be in a relationship, but he was also willing to go at my pace.
Yeah. Yeah. But I was also like going through school. At that point, I think I was in grad school. And I think when we started dating, I had broken up with the person I was dating then. And then we started dating, and I started doing my practicum to be a therapist. I mean, I don't know if you're aware, if you're a therapist, when you're in grad school, you also have to do like a practicum type thing where you go to a site and you basically work for free for like an entire
internship.
year and see clients.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like an internship. That's a good way of putting at it. So I was like super busy with that, plus going to school full time. So I think we definitely started off in a pretty hectic place in my life, at least.
Yeah, the landscape of our personal lives 8 years ago is much different than it is now.
It makes me wonder, though, if you guys would have like been able to find your way back to each other if two very important things didn't happen. If Ed hadn't been patient, and if Ed hadn't been in a better more ready emotionally. So both of you kind of
We're on me.
Yeah, I will say that I was a little bit emotionally turbulent, and what attracted me to Ed was that he was a lot more emotionally mature.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the funny thing is,
does that translate into readiness though for a relationship? Is that the same thing to you guys?
No, but it was a marker for something that I discovered I needed in a relationship. It was the stability and the maturity and the patience in that regard.
Yeah, especially since you weren't really out to people yet. I think my only qualm in the beginning was like, I don't care if you're not out, but I'm out. And if you're okay with being out to my friends, then I don't care if you're out to your friends.
Yeah.
So I think that was like the whole thing with us. But I think, what's funny is I wasn't always super patient in relationships. I think this was the time where I was like, let's try not being like super anxiously attached this time. And let's try to give him his space and see how that works out. And that actually ended up working out the very first time I tried it. Because I'm normally pretty anxious in relationships. I'm usually pretty like, oh, like, what are they doing? Where are they? Like, why haven't they answered my text yet? Like, do they hate me?
I will say, realistically, you were a little bit at the beginning.
Well, it was a transition.
He has to crawl before he walks, yes.
exactly. But I was also in the same boat where I was, when we first started dating, I was like, we're just dating.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing other people.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that you're okay with that. And you weren't.
Well, I didn't know. Yeah.
Yeah. No. I wasn't also super forthcoming.
Yeah.
So, there was a little bit of a little bit of a learning period there.
Yeah.
But we both at one point just decided to try to make it work. Between me sort of not settling down, but me committing.
Yeah.
and Ed learning how to be trusting.
Yeah. That was a big part.
Actually, I've never had to analyze it, but it ended up.
We did have to analyze it.
Compromising, yeah.
Ed, you're a therapist, is that right?
I am, yes.
Joey, what do you do?
I work in architecture and interior design.
And do you overanalyze the relationship, or do you act as a therapist in the relationship?
No, I'm actually really good at turning off the therapist role outside of work. It's kind of like something that just really came naturally to me that's been really helpful in this career. So I don't think I do.
No, you don't. You're actually very good at that. I would be very self-conscious if you were.
Yeah. I usually don't. I actually don't even really know how to translate sometimes. Like, people always ask me, like, what's Joey's problem? And I was like, what could you diagnose Joey with? And I always say, I don't actually know. I never thought about diagnosing Joey.
What?
I feel like that's also like
assholes are asking you that question.
A lot of people who aren't therapists, that's what they're curious about. Like, are you diagnosing me? I was like, I never even thought about diagnosing you. That's like my job. I don't want to do that for free.
Yeah. But a lot of people are still understanding or seeking therapy, especially after the pandemic. I think that the world has changed in terms of mental health awareness too. So there are a lot of people that still don't understand. We forget because it's still not super commonplace. But there are a lot of people who just don't understand therapy and what that means.
Yeah.
And, that it's a job.
Yeah.
And it's separate.
Oh, a lot of therapists don't understand that.
I was about to say, who's the audience for this show?
Well, you also think, a therapist must have really healthy relationships all the time. And that's not true either. We fall into the same traps everyone does in terms of our thinking patterns.
I feel like your job is helping other people with their problems. That doesn't necessarily mean
that you're not a hot mess yourself. Yeah. Exactly. Joey, you said something about I didn't know I needed that. And that's funny because Kelly and I were just talking about that before you joined us, about therapy being a little bit about that, of figuring out what you actually need, and how a lot of people don't even ask themselves that. They are just kind of going through the motions of life.
What I was saying before we started is that I went to see couples counseling years and years ago with my ex. And what started as one kind of therapy quickly changed to becoming individual therapy. And I completely pivoted, and it became a whole different topic, a whole different therapy for me. So it became more about focusing on me versus us. You know what I'm saying? So that really helped, I think, my long-term growth. Didn't help the relationship long-term growth, but it helped mine.
Yeah. That's good. My first foray into seeking therapy or being a patient was actually in couples counseling with us. Because we were trying to figure out, it was that transitional period for us.
Yeah.
That was my first experience, and it eventually became, individual therapy for me as well. I was more open to that when I needed it, which was in these past couple of years in the pandemic. I think it was really helpful having that space to analyze both in our relationship and later my own sort of problems and shortcomings.
Joe, you mentioned, your parents got divorced not too long ago. I'm a product of divorce too. So that certainly plays a part in how we see relationships, and our parents kind of help define that for many people. How did that affect your outlook on love and commitment?
So my parents got divorced much later in my life. So I felt like I was already a developed adult, or should have been, because I think that the most harmful thing was the lack of honesty with themselves and with each other. I was always kind of walking through that battlefield with rose-tinted glasses. I didn't really get a full picture of what was going on until I was able to process it a lot later and realized how it affected me, because I didn't understand things like trust or honesty or true selflessness. Like, it always was attached to something else.
And you're the only child.
Yeah. And I was the only child, so I didn't have any other
I think
filter.
it's different when you're the only child and your parents get divorced.
Yeah. You know, you have that one person who's like, well, they shouldn't treat you like that. And you're like, you know what? Yeah. I didn't have that. I just thought that this was the norm.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of learning for me. And I will admit, especially at the beginning of our relationship, that there was a lot of learning to be had.
Well, also the different levels of being out already, I think, was really
that was a whole other,
yeah.
I would even compartmentalize that as a separate issue. There was a lot.
I've been thinking a lot about that lately, that topic. I have 3 kids, and they're younger, so it's going to be a while before they have partners. But I was like thinking to myself, I hope my kids don't come out to me. And let me explain, because I'm looking at your faces. I was thinking, like, I hope that, like, through my behavior and my actions, that I have unequivocally conveyed where I stand on the issue, and that when it does come time for them to have a partner, that they'll just bring that person home. And I get that our society still requires this extra step for gay people to come out, to make some formal declaration to the people in their lives, in their professional life. But my hope is that I've done enough throughout their childhood where they would be able to be as carefree as their straight siblings, to just bring the person home that they're going to bring home, and not have to take that extra step, that I don't need them to take that extra step with me and make it official in some way, or prep me in some way for it.
Like the next generations and the next generations after that are experiencing a lot more of an open and welcoming environment. At least there's representation of that.
Yeah. I mean, it's also kind of hard too, because Joey's technically bisexual, so he's not like gay like me. So I think Joey kind of always has to come out, because we've been in a relationship for so long, so everyone just kind of assumes that he's gay.
Yeah, I'm
like,
to the point where I don't even correct people.
He's very much still into women, even though we've been dating for like 8 years. Trust me, he's still into women.
Wink, 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 wink. Nudge, nudge.
I see the stares. I see the like. I see the comments. I see the what you're liking on Instagram. Like, interesting.
Well, being in a committed relationship doesn't mean you stop being, attracted to other people outside your relationship. Yeah.
But I mean, I think for Joey, that's kind of always kind of a continuous thing of coming out. It's like, you guys are gay, and I'm like, one of us is.
Yeah, and the confusion, like, wait a second,
you're not gay. I mean, it's surprising.
How does that work?
Yeah, but help me out here. How does that make you feel?
I feel fine with it. I've actually, I don't know what it is about me, but most of the men I've dated have been bisexual. So I've been kind of just used to it.
You have a type.
I mean, I do feel a little bit more defensive than Joey sometimes. I'm like, I feel like I'm the one that's correcting more than Joey is. Like when someone says, like you guys are gay and things like that. I'm like, actually, Joey's not.
Oh yeah,
not
no,
gay.
Because it happens so often for me.
Like I think Joey just kind of forgets it, but
no, yeah, it's a lot easier for me to like, okay, let it go.
I don't think it's really affected me too much because I'm just kind of used to it. I don't even know.
Well, you have non-compete issues. I mean, you don't have any competition issues with the opposite sex.
If anything, I practice like something more like gender monogamy, where I'm like, I don't really care if you're like, you find a woman attractive, because I can't really compete because it's totally different.
Yeah.
But I think I would get jealous more with men, and I think some people feel the opposite. But I feel that way because I'm like, well, if you were to cheat on me with a guy, I'd be a lot more hurt than if you cheated on me with a woman.
Yeah.
So with a woman, I'd be like, well, I don't have a lot of those things. So if you were looking for that, then what am I going to do?
Right.
But with a guy, what are you doing? I have all of them.
But I mean, I think that there's an important distinction here, because like there is the whole like sexual identity because of my attraction to other people. But then the act of not, like, it's kind of the same thing either way.
What do you mean?
Like not acting on sexual attraction to other people.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I've like being in a committed relationship is like
Yeah, fidelity is fidelity. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
It's just a bigger pool of
Yeah.
people that I have to reject.
Sounds like
I
a
love
problem.
that.
So many people. So many.
That made me sound super.
It's a good problem to have.
Awesome.
And to your point earlier, like I think that there's a lot of, or there are at least larger pockets where the stigma is not as prevalent in the generations moving forward. I think because like me coming out, like 5 to 8 years ago, was different than me being out 10 to 12 to 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Like that was different.
Well, now it's different again.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. There's
It's
apparently
rapidly
no
changing.
guarantees in life.
Yeah.
I have a good friend of mine. We go back like 25 years, and my wife always said, so and so is gay. I'm like, no, he's not. And it never really, I never thought about that. But then I'm like, yeah, I guess he is. And I'm not going to say his name, but I see each other. We see each other maybe once every year, maybe once a year, and I just gradually, we don't need to talk about it. Like it just became like he just, he is gay, but I was hanging out with him and his boyfriend, but like we never talked about it. It was never an issue. Like I didn't care. He didn't feel like he had to tell me. It was just like it just was, and it felt very comfortable, right? So it never was an issue, and I just we never talk about it. And I think maybe now we do a little bit, but because now he's in a more of an out relationship. But for the longest time, I just I just felt like I didn't particularly care either way. If he was, he wasn't. Didn't matter to me. He's my good friend. But it never became an issue. We never talked about it. And to this day, we still have never talked about it. And I don't think we have to, right? I mean, you helped me on this, but it seems like it's just if you have a good friend, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a talking point.
Yeah. I mean, I think I actually a majority of my friends are straight men growing up, and even currently now, I think most of them are straight men. And a lot of times we don't really talk about it. I mean, I think the eventual goal for development for gay people is really just being able to reintegrate where your identity is not just that anymore. It's not just that. Yeah. Even when I was in high school, I still have my same friends who were straight, like in high school, that I still hang out with. Actually, I've been friends since like middle school. And like some of them I never actually like fully came out to. We just started bringing guys over. And I think they kind of always knew. And I kind of just eventually realized that I was freaking guys that I was dating. So yeah, I think it depends. I think some people require you to come out. I think if someone was outwardly homophobic, I think that those are the times where I actually had to come out and be like, hey, you're saying things that are kind of offensive. Yeah. And by the way, I'm, gay. Please stop saying those things. Yeah. But some people just didn't care and, was totally fine with it.
Yeah. It's really weird being in a gay relationship now and having to admit that there was a time that I was kind of homophobic, because I remember being in middle school, high school, and I remember things or conversations like, how can you tell a gay person from a straight person? Like, oh, they cross their legs in a certain way, or they have a certain voice. And I just remember it being, I feel like our generation is sort of on the cusp of that, not being okay, I guess.
Yeah, but I also feel like I'm from the school of, I think everyone's a little bit homophobic. And I think that's kind of, acknowledging that you have a little bit homophobia because you were raised to be homophobic.
Yeah, that was
you don't really get away. You don't have parents like Michelle.
Yeah, we don't. We didn't.
And even if you have parents like Michelle, like there was also like, you're not just interacting with your parents 24/7. There's also like the outside world. You go to school, you develop with other children, you meet other children who are raised differently. Yeah. So in one way or another, you're always kind of affected by it. And I think that's kind of true for all of isms, like racism, ageism, sexism, all that stuff.
Yeah, there's certain things that you grow up thinking is normal. Again, like the environment in the household, as my parents like divorcing, like there was a lot of stuff that didn't get processed, and I'm still like working through it now. Yeah. Same thing as that environment, because we, I didn't have that sort of environment, like parents like Michelle or friends like Kelly. Like,
basically, we both wish we had a parent like Michelle.
Well, I mean, but Ed, you make a good point. It's like and kids are sponges, and there's no way you cannot internalize the messages of society. And I mean, my little girls come home, and one of them said the other day, like, "Oh, girls aren't good at that," and I was like, "What?" Like, well, who told you that? Where did you? But like, it happens all the time where they come home with a message, and I'm like, that is very contrary to what you're learning at home, and yet that's the one that is prevalent in your brain right now. It's
But
frustrating.
that's one of those things where like you're very aware of that as a parent, and you can not correct it, but like you have the ability to sort of influence them more positively.
Yeah, but I think kids are just so tuned to try to fit in that it is really just hard not to like kind of go against the grain when you and your mom, when your parents aren't there. You know, everyone's saying this thing, and you're like, okay, I guess I have to do this too to fit in because I don't have anyone else here except these other kids that are around me. You know,
That was a
so
whole
you can't
other...
really blame. Well, I mean, I'm not saying you're blaming them, but
No, like the whole idea of fitting in was something that I didn't quite understand until a lot later in life. And I think that it's probably a good sign. I'm not a therapist, obviously, but I feel like my own personal experience that, trying to fit in is part of understanding who you are.
yeah,
And
who you surround
don't...
yourself with
and
too.
who you surround yourself with, because you have to have the choice, and you have to make the mistakes, and you have to have those learning opportunities.
Like kids don't realize that you get to choose who you fit in with
Until you realize you don't.
until they're too old. Too old to have friends.
Right.
I know. I'm like,
I was telling Joe, I was like, I always want to make a new friend. I want to go out and meet someone, like, but it's just so exhausting.
Yeah, and I'm an introvert, so that's just how it is typically.
And then, like, some people will be like, why don't you just work on your current friendships? I'm like, that's also hard.
Yeah.
So my question, here's my theory. Tell me if I'm wrong. In LA, there's a kind of a grass is greener situation happening with a lot of people in the dating world because there's so many options. What I see a lot in my practice is people being a little bit more nitpicky about their partners, a little bit less tolerant of their partner's flaws or quirks, because there's this thing in the back of their mind saying there's, dime a dozen. I'll find someone else out there.
Because literally in LA, there are dozens of people that fit that.
Yeah, exactly. When the pool is bigger, do you get the sense? I mean, I could be wrong, but I get the sense from the people who I see in my practice that when the pool is bigger, they are less committed to the relationships they're in sometimes.
I will say, okay, one of the things that I actually kind of think is cute, and it's kind of worked for me and Joey, is that we very much have always taken the relationship like day by day. Like we've always tried focusing on the present. Like we even joke around. It's like, hey, do you want to be my boyfriend for the week, or do you want to be together for like the next 2 weeks? Because we always want to make sure that we're just staying in the present right now, and we're not really like planning. Like, oh, I think it's a lot easier to manage when you're like thinking that way, as opposed to be like, we're gonna die together. We're gonna be together for the rest of our lives and like be buried in the same gravesite. So I think for me, that's helped a lot in being able to like, oh, if I really, really wanted to leave, then maybe I'll do it in a year. But right now, I committed to Joey for the week that we're together for the week. And I think that's kind of worked for us. And it's become a cute thing where we're kind of just like, hey, you want to be my boyfriend for the week, or you want to be boyfriends together today, or tomorrow, are you open tomorrow to be my boyfriend? Like we'll do like little small things like that. I also think like we're also very cognizant about the amount of work that we put into a relationship. And I think every time I think of like maybe starting with someone else, I'm like, oh my God, it's so much work. Like the place that we've gotten right now is like, there has to be like an egregious problem for me to want to redo all of like the relationship, learning to be with each other and like teaching each other how to be with each other, and kind of just getting used to things that we can't change about each other. Like it's just like amalgamation of like a lot of hard work that sounds exhausting.
Yeah, I don't think that we're great people to ask about that.
Well, I mean, I think we've always, one of the things that we've always bonded with is we're very realistic about everything. You know, we're not like trying to like paint this idea of like a fairy tale. We're very much like, okay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That was very important for me, is to because, and I think it was like partially due to my parents getting divorced later in life, me being cognizant of that. But I didn't buy in. I've never really bought into the fairy tale of, you know.
I did when I was younger.
Yeah. But he was okay with me not.
Yeah. I don't think, I actually like that he wasn't. I've dated before where people believed in that quote unquote fairy tale more than I did. And that never worked for me. Actually, I usually got bored after a while, which ended the relationship. But I think I have to be the more romantic one, is what I realized. But I also realized that being super overly like idealistic and fairy tale-ish also wasn't a good thing for me personally. Yeah. So I stopped doing it as heavily, but I would say I'm probably more romantic and idealistic than you are.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
The problem with the fairy tale part is that you build it up so big, and then oftentimes it never meets expectations. At least I think.
Well, it also never shows them fighting.
Right.
And you don't really, it doesn't teach you how to manage conflict. It teaches you to be happy. And then you kind of expect to always be happy in a relationship. And you're like, well, that's not how it works, especially for a long-term relationship. But you can't be happy all the time.
Yeah. I mean, things are a lot more simple when you could just end a story with and they lived happily ever after.
And they never fought in their entire lives.
Yeah, and then we don't care about the rest of it. It's like, okay, this is what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Sorry, when you guys talk about how much work it would be to start over, I want to acknowledge that you still are doing a lot of work, because those mini commitments, the will you be my boyfriend for a week, that makes you maintain effort to be, to still keep the boyfriend vibe going, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
where
that's
you're
very
still
true.
being a good version of yourself. You're still,
Yeah. I think we realized that too. I think after a while we were like, maybe we should start scheduling dates, because I think there was a couple of months where we were like, we haven't like seen each other alone for a while.
We moved into a place by ourselves,
and we got a dog
because we had another roommate for a while. We got a dog, and it was all in the middle of the pandemic, and we were very focused on getting the apartment up and getting the puppy trained and like figuring out work during these difficult times.
And we were working at home, so that it started bleeding into like our regular lives too. Like you were working, like I wasn't, but Joey would be working like the entire day because he was so used to being at work and then coming home and then being done. But when he was working at home, it was just like working the entire day and then night. And then I think that took up a lot of time too. And then I was hanging out with a lot of friends like online, like to like video games and stuff like that. And the puppy training, like you mentioned, that we were like, we haven't hung out like one-on-one.
Yeah, it was like the biggest point of friction in recent years, I think.
But to Michelle's point is that, yes, we're still trying. We're still doing things.
I will say
to maintain the relationship.
One of the things about the fairy tale, not conundrum, the fairy tale problem is that, we don't talk about fighting, and people don't really learn how to, to manage that. And I think that the things that have made our relationship successful has been how we fight.
We fight really well.
Yeah. Like it's never end of the world, and we acknowledge that each other is feeling the anger or the rage or the disappointment or the sadness.
And we take like separation breaks too,
and we understand that we need that.
What was the last fight you guys had, and why?
I mean, honestly, we don't really have big fights as much anymore. Usually, it's usually about chores. I think I think it's about chores. Joey and I have very different strengths and weaknesses. Like the things I'm very strong at, he's not great in. But the things that he's like, a good example is like I'm really good at managing things day by day. I'm like almost like a robot where I'm like I need the routine, but I fall apart in an emergency. Like if an emergency happens, like I'm like a rabbit. I just freeze, and everything is happening, and I'm just like I don't do anything. Joey is not great at like the day-to-day things, but when there's an emergency, Joey is like so fast to act. Like, oh, we need to do this, this, and this. We're planning this. Just do this, and he tells me what to do, and it happens. Yeah. So that's a really good example. But for chores, Joey's really good at like the really big cleans, and I'm really good at like keep maintaining things day by day. And I think that's where a lot of the conflict happens.
Yeah, no, and we have very different messes.
Yeah.
That's the thing, which is fine because then we don't our messes don't compile on each other.
That's true.
But like I'm dust and wet and like surfaces.
And
He's clutter and
dust. I hate dusting.
Yeah, the shelves and stuff like that. I will vacuum the upholstery so yeah, we've got different strengths.
My parents, I had just celebrated last week their 49 wedding anniversary, 49th. And one thing that they say all the time is like, your partner's going to annoy the shit out of you a lot. And if you can't tolerate that, if you can't see that that's just part of a relationship, if you're going to be with someone that long for 8 years, you're going to have moments where you are annoyed or upset or frustrated or irritated. There are people when people can't tolerate that that's a piece of being in a relationship. That's where a lot of people get into trouble because again, I think it goes back to that fairy tale. Like if you're thinking there shouldn't be any conflict in my relationship, then you're setting yourself up for failure, I think.
Yeah. I actually told one of my friends the other time because he's never been in a relationship. And he was like, we were talking about relationships. And I told him after like a while, when I started dating a lot of people, I started dating people based on like the stuff I didn't like about them, which was like a really, really weird concept because people always think about, oh, what are the things that you like about the person? But I'm like, yeah, that's easy to identify because obviously like the things that you like is the things you like. But the things that you don't like are those things that you can deal with for a long period of time. Like obviously I have a lot of like red flags and like barriers of like, this is something I'm not okay with dealing with for a long period of time. But like Joey's late a lot. And that's something that I can kind of manage and deal with in a long period of time. But
He's gotten better.
He has gotten better.
Compromise.
Yeah. But I think that's a good point too. I think it's just, people don't focus on like the bad things. And when they start dating people, they don't think about like, what are the things about them that you don't like? And can you manage that from like a long extended period of time?
I think a lot of people, they're so focused on what things should be. And their idea of that is so off base that, I don't know, it's setting yourself up for disappointment. And I'm talking from a place of, thinking not just relationships, but like expectations of self and your abilities and stuff like that that's one thing that I've recently learned is how skewed some of those ideas have been, and it's not easy to rewrite. It's part of the learning period of understanding other people's weaknesses is understanding your views as well and your expectations and how founded they are, what they're founded in.
Yeah, like what is this? How is this about you and not just about the other person?
Mm-hmm. I think we're both very self-aware. At least I'd like to think so.
Moving forward, do you see any challenges on the horizon? In terms of career, relationship, in terms of like where you guys are now and versus where you want to be in the future? Do you talk about that?
I mean, all of those things, really.
Yeah, we do try to stay present, but sometimes we do try to talk about like things that are upcoming. I will say because we're so present focused that I think we don't really talk about the future as much as we could, but we do still. But I think conflicts wise, I can't.
I think we taking the honesty for it. I do think I know to expect that we are going to have problems at the next hurdle, whatever that is. If that's adopting, if that's getting married, if that's
getting married,
owning property, if we can.
Yeah,
like we're working through it, but there are going to be rough patches, I'm sure. But again, we'll deal with it until we can't, I guess.
Yeah. Or one of us dies.
Oh yeah.
We probably get something happens where we can't anymore.
Yeah.
When I used to see a therapist years ago, I mentioned her earlier, but she always just tell me I wasn't being present, and I tended to always think about the future. What's next? What's next? What's next? What can I do? And I wasn't being in the moment, and she kept telling me that. And I finally one day it clicked, and I realized what she was talking about. And it really changed my entire perspective on life. So you just kind of remind me of that, Ed, when you mentioned being present.
And I have a really hard time with that too. I think I'm a lot better at being present in the relationship than I am in my personal life, to be quite honest with you. But I mean, I think we've talked about like that too, like having kids and getting a place that we own and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
it's about making those things present eventually.
Yeah, it's like finding the balance of like, what do we need to do right now to eventually get to that goal?
It also takes a lot of energy. So it's, I mean, I have to admit that I have I have a battery and it runs out for some of these things. And I'm just like, then I need to zone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they're heavy subjects and they take a lot of emotion and emotional and mental fortitude to really address.
Joey's gonna nap after this.
Probably.
For like 2 hours.
I love naps.
Right?
Yeah, Joey's always like, how do you do this every day? I was like, I don't know. I was like, I don't know how you do your work every day. I was like, I don't want to do that every day.
But again, I think you bring a really good point up, Kelly, about perspective, because I think that's what that is we all view these things very differently, including work.
Yeah.
Like it's perspective and expectations, how you view things and what you expect out of that, I think sets you up for success or failure.
And I think a theme that goes with that you're really talking about is knowing yourself and knowing what your own expectations are, what your own needs are, and particularly what you guys talked about today, which I hope people listening will take in, is know your conflict style and know your partner's conflict style. They're not always compatible. There might be adjustments that need to be made there. But if you don't even know how you deal with conflict, then that could be a deal breaker in any relationship. So awareness. Oh man, I'm such a cliche therapist talking about awareness, but it does kind of come down to that sometimes.
So you've talked about like love languages, and that's sort of like a trending.
It's the opposite of conflict.
But there isn't as much focus on the conflict archetypes, and is there something like that? As somebody who doesn't know anything about therapy.
Michelle knows more than me. Michelle actually supervised me, so Michelle probably knows more than me about this, but I don't think so. I mean, I think we just talk about conflict styles like Michelle had said. There's no love language. There's no
pyramid, or there's no bite size, social media type way of talking about conflicts in the same way as love languages. But I feel like, Ed, this could be your niche here. The EULO theory.
Book.
Yeah.
No. Sounds like a lot of work.
But that's exactly what we've been talking about, is everyone focuses on the love languages and the stuff like that. But if you're not aware of the other side of things, if you're not comfortable with the conflict, and if you don't know how you are going to handle conflict when it comes.
The good and bad thing about couples is eventually they're going to figure it out. I mean, you're going to get into a conflict one way or another. Hopefully you will. And actually, that's true. Like some couples we've met never had a conflict before, and that was also a little bit weird.
Yeah, that's you guys not being super honest with each other, and you'll eventually snap.
Yeah,
I think,
and then that's when they'll realize their conflict styles. Yeah.
Ed and Joey, it's been awesome talking to you two. I mean, it's certainly give us better perspective on relationships and finding that person who is a good match. You guys have this opposites attract almost thing going on with, you kind of complement each other really, really well. It's kind of cool to see that.
We talk about that sometimes. What are our strengths as a couple? Especially leading up to this podcast, it got us in the mind space of thinking about that. And I'm like, that's what our strength is, I think.
We're very balanced. Yeah. I think it's nice because we really do make for each other's shortcomings in certain parts. So if there's someone has to plan a certain thing, it really depends on who's going to take that on. It's like, well, that's definitely your thing, or this is definitely my thing. Yeah. It very rarely ever overlaps, or it very rarely happens where I feel like one of us is ill-equipped to do something.
What would be your one piece of advice for other couples?
Pick someone that you can fight well.
Fight
with.
Good. Fight well.
Healthy fighting.
Frequently.
You can find someone where you can have a conflict and be secure enough to get through that conflict with, I think is honestly one of the things that we both learned was really important.
Yeah.
Because I think, when you have fights are just going to happen one way or another.
So learn to deal with it.
Learn to fight with someone that you can deal with it with.
And find someone who will, who can,
yeah,
who can support that fighting style too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's clean fighting and then there's dirty fighting, right? And you don't want to be with somebody who's a dirty fighter. You want to be somebody, at least somebody's going to play by the rules. I'm guessing,
I wonder if is that constitute like maybe a conflict style, like dirty fight, like really
like domestic violence.
Domestic violence. Is something to be said of
getting? I guess dirty fighting is getting mean or getting really personal or getting
the style
or nitpicky.
Yeah, the style is called below the belt, where you go for the kill or you go to wound the person because you're frustrated or you're hurt. You want to hurt the person back. So a vengeful style of
conflict. You've been in a relationship for so long too, yeah. And I think when you've been in a relationship for a really long time too, like below the belt becomes so much easier to like the default to as well, because you just know so much about the person.
You get good at it.
Like you really know how to like wound someone, like Michelle was saying. Yeah.
Can I wound you?
Probably.
Should we try?
No.
You totally could. You know exactly what would hurt your partner. I'm not saying you should. I'm saying you could if you. But you
this is not a roast. We're not in a relationship roast. I'm not gonna roast you.
That's a different show.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the next episode.
I would not mind being roasted, but I don't think you would like being roasted.
No, I would get very. Yeah, I would take it personally. I think you would take it personally too. I could find something.
Oh yeah, maybe.
Yeah, because you guys would be saying truthful things. You're not joking about, like something silly. You would be joking about like real flaws of the other person, which is not fun.
But if it's truthful and funny, I can accept it. But if it's just truthful and mean, then that's where it's kind of like that has no positive effect.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
If you're at least giving someone joy and making them laugh,
we could destroy each other.
Okay. Right. And that's the thing. A relationship cannot survive without respect. And the minute you choose to be mean, you have crossed the line of respect. So that's the problem with that.
I think that's the thing. Now. We could destroy each other, but we choose not to. And that's good.
Yes, because you're maintaining respect. And respect equals love.
I think it's called love. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That love thing.
I love you.
I love you too.
Oh, can we end on that? That was just.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, best of luck with both of you moving forward with your relationship and life in general.
And I just want to say your honesty and your feedback have been really valuable. I hope you know that. One of the reasons we started this is there's a lot of people out there who aren't sure if they should be in the relationship that they're in. They're questioning it. They're not. So this type of dialogue, this conversation that you guys had with us today, it helps move the needle forward for a lot of people who have questions, who are just kind of struggling in their relationships right now.
Well, thanks for having us. Yeah, this was fun. Let us know if you want us to come back.
Yeah. We'll have an Ed and Joey corner.
We'll fight for our next fight.
Yeah, we'll just call you for our future fight.
Yeah, exactly.
Part 2. We'll do a follow-up for a year from now.
And Joey, just Ed and I did work together like several years ago, but I have so much affection for you, Ed. And when you reached out, I was like, there's some people you don't keep in touch with, but when you think about them, you smile. That's you for me. So.
Aww. That's what I said to Joey about you. I was like, we're doing this because I love Michelle. That was like one of my most favorite supervisors I've ever had.
This was a good example of a show where we didn't even have an agenda. Well, it just kind of became its own thing. And we kind of just talked about relationships. And it was really cool just to kind of shoot the shit.
Right. And I like these types of shows too, because it's so universal. We all can relate to the little relationship quirks that they were talking about. And so it didn't have to be about one specific topic. More so it was just like, hey, this resonates with anyone who's in a relationship can relate to these little flare-ups that happen. And they are in a place that is so cool where like they're figuring it out. They're making it work. They're putting in effort. They're doing the things you need to do to maintain a healthy relationship. And they also have, this honest feedback about the pitfalls and the challenges. And that's kind of what I'm hoping people who are listening can relate to.
Yeah, at least they communicate. That's the first step, I think. And if you can't communicate, it just won't work. And they are definitely communicating.
Yeah, but what they're doing also is listening and being honest with each other. And, I could tick off all these things that they do well in their relationship. But again, we kind of concluded with the same themes we tend to, which is that you got to understand what you're expecting out of your relationship, how you're kind of getting in the way of your relationship by having, sometimes inappropriate expectations of what your relationship is supposed to be. And then, if you don't know yourself well enough to make different choices when things go awry, then you're going to run into trouble. But there are a couple that maybe wouldn't have worked out. They might not have be together 8 years down the road if they didn't do these things early on for each other, show respect and communicate. So,
well, cool. It was a great show.
Yeah, very grateful for their participation.
If you're struggling with family, friends, or coworkers, in a bad relationship and wondering what to do, or want a relationship and to set yourself up for success, then we want to talk to you. So make your appointment on Unrelating. Just drop us an email at theunrelatingpodcast@gmail.com to be our next guest.